This July, we're taking life seriously. Cardiac arrest is scary and more common than you might think. Did you know that every year nearly 9 million people will experience a cardiac event outside of hospital? Would you know what to do? I'm Australian actor Steve Bastoni, and I'm urging everyone to learn CPR as part of our Don't Die July campaign. Visit don'tdiejuly.com and sign up today, because you can't put a price on life.
From national security to global corruption, this is the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers and the Andrew Eborn. Here on the Muckrakers, we pledge to continue tackling the most pressing and controversial news issues of our time, shining more light and less heat on them issues and various other matters that concern you. We don't just ask the questions, but we question those answers. And extraordinary scenes overnight coming in via the media of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the US Congress. We can do a deep dive into that. And also Sir Keir Starmer, since Starmageddon, his first ever PMQs. How did he get on and what didn't he really talk about? We're going to look at that as well. And today on the Muckrakers, I'm joined by the two wonderful co-hosts made up of myself, Andrew Eborn and Taylor Hudak, and James Freeman. Welcome back to you both.
Hello, everybody.
Good to see you. Now, we saw these extraordinary speech that Netanyahu gave to Congress. A number of people boycotted it, including Nancy Pelosi. What did you make of it, James?
Every time he opens his mouth, I think, look, you know, whether it's on food aid, where he's kind of like made out that Israel is fulfilling its needs according to what the UN has been telling it to do time and time again over the past few months, whether it's on that, safeguarding civilians. Oh, my God. I mean, how Israel can say or claim that they safeguard civilians is just beyond me. I mean, what the numbers now, I think, are anywhere between 35 and 40,000 civilians have been killed. I think 90% of the whole population of Gaza has had to move at least once, been evacuated. Lots of Palestinians have been evacuated up to 10 times. 80% of Gaza is now a no-go zone. And, you know, we've seen this week, they claim to be protecting or trying to protect civilians. But this week, they gave an evacuation order to 400,000 Palestinians and literally gave them no time. It wasn't clear where they should go. It was just get out of the area because we're going to attack. And we've seen scores of deaths because Israel just went straight in there. So I think pretty much everything that he has said, do I want to use the L word? Yeah. I mean, if I'm going to be blunt, just speak from the heart, I think he's a big fat liar. Everything that comes out of his mouth, even their stated objective, which is to exterminate Hamas. I think actually it's clear now that what the real objective is yes, okay, they want to get rid of Hamas, but they want rid of the whole Palestinian population from Gaza. I have got my own thoughts on why they want to do that, but we'll talk about that during the show because I know we've got more questions on that. But yes, I don't believe a word that he says. I think it's all lies and propaganda.
Do you believe him, Taylor?
I completely agree with James. One thing I hate to see, of course, is the American people, the public in general, being propagandized, whether that be about COVID-19, Ukraine, the EU, or any other issue. And that's exactly what happened yesterday during this speech that was given by Netanyahu. Just to give a few stats about that speech, when he first walked into the hall to give his speech, there was an applause that lasted for about 4 minutes. There was audible cheers and many handshakes given to him. And it really has people questioning, okay, who is leading the United States of America? Because remember, this is also at a time, as we discussed on Tuesday, where Joe Biden is missing. I mean, he has resurfaced as of yesterday, but he was, MIA for quite some time. There was also an assassination attempt against a candidate, former President Trump. And then now you have Netanyahu speaking before Congress, and they are all very much willing to listen to what he has to say, despite committing atrocities in the Middle East and war crimes. And just a few points here is that this speech, while it was, of course, planned well in advance, I think for many months, it is coming 1 week after the ICJ ruling, which did provide a non-binding legal opinion, although it is still significant, I would say, that Israel's occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem is illegal and it has to come to an end. And that also other countries have to do what they can to ensure that Israel is held accountable for this and that they do not aid these territories and help further the occupation. But it very much seems as if Netanyahu is not going to give any weight to this ruling, as is expected, I would say. And the United States is really taking a complicit role in all of this. Now, that's speaking to what happened this past week. But if you look at the substance of the speech as well, I think Americans should be completely outraged, given he attacked those who oppose him, attacked dissenters. This really goes against the First Amendment, principles of free speech, the right to protest, which we'll get into later. But lots going on with this speech, lots of problems to get into.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And we did a deep dive into the statistics. One of the things he claimed, he said the attack on the 7th of October by Hamas was equivalent to 20 9/11s in one day. And it's obvious why he wanted to reference 9/11, because obviously that gets everybody's blood boiling and people, and it touches the hearts and minds. But I was looking at the figures because I thought, well, let's do a deep dive into this to make that make sense. And actually, if you look at the population of Israel is what he was referring to in 2023. It was about 9 million people. And actually, if you worked out the population of the US at that time, it's 341,000. And he was comparing the number of people who were killed on October the 7th with the number of people killed in 9/11. And 9/11, 2001, there were 2,977 people killed from 93 nations. And actually, what he's trying to say is, look, you did the comparison of the size of the population with the size of Israel. Actually, it works out about 15 times as much as 9/11 comparatively. I then said, well, hang on about, let's have a look at what Gaza and that population, the latest casualty figures there, as of July the 23rd at 1:30 p.m. I did a deep dive into this. 39,090 people, including 15,000 children. What that equates to, the original population, we were sort of looking at that sort of side, it works out about 0.05 of the population, 0.05, which is about 5,740 9/11s. 5,740 9/11s, which is abhorrent. What's your take on that, James?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at the statistics. I looked at the wider parallels between 9/11 and these the 7th of October attacks, because I do see a lot of parallels, actually. I think there are a lot of us that realize that 9/11, we don't quite know exactly what took place, but there was, the US was complicit in some way. Actors in the US, I don't know whether that was the government, but I think it's clear now. A lot of people believe that was a false flag event in order to give the pretext for America to start rolling out its plan for the Middle East. And, there's been lots of leaks of this plan going back a few decades now of, the ultimate plan is to take out Iran. And in that respect, if you look at it from that respect, the October the 7th attacks, let's first look at them. When you look at how those attacks were able to happen, there's huge question marks which haven't been answered. The fact that flimsy paragliders, the easiest things to shoot out of the sky that you can imagine, they were allowed to go across multiple points in that security fence were breached. The most high security wall in the world. And if you look at what's going on geopolitically more wider than that? Well, what happened in 2022? Well, the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up. I think a lot of us believe that that was done by the US or at least NATO forces, which turned off all of the gas from Russia to Europe. Now, interestingly, that year after that happened, Israel signed a deal with the EU to supply gas to the EU. And lo and behold, there is a gas field off of Gaza, which is within the economic exclusion zone of Gaza, with 1 trillion cubic feet of gas. The other thing that we know is that Israel wants to build a canal. It's the Ben Gurion Canal project. To basically, well, it won't just compete with the Suez Canal. It will out-compete it because it's going to be wider. It'll have more traffic going. It can have traffic going in both ways, and it can have bigger ships. I think what's happening in Gaza is part of a wider plan that the US is involved with Israel. And basically, the Gazan population is in the way. They're sitting on all of this gas. And actually, that canal, because of security problems due to Hamas, they want rid of Hamas, but they want rid of the whole Palestinian population so that there aren't any security. That is my opinion. And I'm not the only one. There's other journalists that actually wrote before the attacks that basically the implications of all of these things, the canal, the gas, and this deal that Israel has signed with the EU means that for future, conflicts between the Palestinians and Israel, it means that European leaders and the US will not pay any regards to the Palestinian people. And that's exactly what we've seen. Nearly 40,000 of them, bombed, shot, and killed. So I think, there are parallels between 9/11 and the October 7th attacks, but it's quite different than what the Israeli Prime Minister is saying.
Yeah, I know you're absolutely right to make all those points, and it's issues that we keep coming back to. I would also make the point that we spoke about, and people get desensitized to figures, and what happens is every single life, it's tragic, a tragic waste of a life. What's your take on it, Taylor?
Yes, I agree with James. It's also important. I'm glad he brought it up. The facts about the natural resources in the region. It's an important component to all of this. But I must say, when I was listening to this speech yesterday, I actually watched it, I think a total of 3 times, watched this speech. I was shocked when I initially heard him make this comparison to 9/11, that October 7th was equivalent to 20 9/11s. I was shocked he made that comparison. And I think that if any other world leader came to the United States and tried to sort of diminish what happened on 9/11, they would be condemned by the media and so many leaders and officials. But that didn't happen in this case. And I think that, again, speaks to the control that Israel and Netanyahu has over the United States, its political situation and foreign policy. But with that said, I just also want to make note as well that I am in agreement that the official story on 9/11 does not at all make sense. Anybody can look at the facts in this and say that what we are being told does not make sense. I think that it's quite clear and obvious at this point that the United States was involved in the 9/11 attacks. I think all the evidence points to that. And I think that there is a similarity to be drawn, as James said, with regard to what happened on October 7th. It seems that this situation was allowed to happen. And then, of course, there was a completely disproportionate response, which is why Netanyahu keeps bringing it back to October 7th throughout the entire first half of the speech, or really throughout the entire speech. He kept talking about October 7th, October 7th, October 7th, when the discussion really needs to be about, okay, look at the response to this. It's been disproportionate. And as both of you have outlined, 30,000, almost 40,000 people have been killed. Innocent people have been killed. I bet the numbers are much higher than those figures as well. James, I see you're absolutely eager.
Yeah, I'm eager to butt in there because it's interesting, actually. Taylor, you said there that this shows the control that Israel has over US politics and foreign policy. But actually, I think the US is complicit in all of this, even though the optics are presented that the US is trying to restrain. Because look, the big geopolitical picture that nobody's talking about with all of this is China. China is rolling out its Road and Belt initiative, and this solution in the Middle East with this canal that Israel can put in place, it offsets. It helps the US and the West compete against China's Belt and Road initiative. So I don't believe that Israel is controlling the US. I think this is, the US is complicit and it's given the green light. In fact, actually, I think the US probably is part of the planning for all of this. Of course, it can't come out and say that. But this is why I think, we've seen all of the senators and House representatives all lining up, clapping this, because this is all about foreign policy for the US, and it's about mitigating the rise of China. This is geopolitics in action, world level.
No, you're absolutely right. And we're going to do a deeper dive into what Netanyahu said in his inflammatory speech straight after these messages.
When the world's endangered animals need help most, when their lives are at greatest risk, when they would otherwise be lost, the International Fund for Animal Welfare is there, taking action to rescue the animals we love, to protect them and their threatened natural habitats. But the danger to animals the world over is growing, and the need for your help has never been more urgent. On land, you'll help stop poachers from threatening and killing elephants and big cats for the illegal wildlife trade. In the oceans, you'll help rescue dolphins, whales, and seals from deadly hazards. And you'll help rescue, rehabilitate, and release vulnerable animals when disasters strike. Here at home and around the world, we can't do this work without you. See how you can help animals and people thrive together at joinifall.org.
A Better Business Tip from TNT Radio. News Talk Radio listeners are some of the most active and involved listeners of any format. TNT Radio listeners rely on TNT Radio often as their primary source of information. They trust TNT Radio and are highly engaged with the content. If you'd like more information about advertising on TNT Radio, simply fill out your details on our contact page and we'll be in touch. To find out more, go to tntradio.live.
From national security to global corruption, this is the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn, James Freeman and Taylor Hudak, looking at Benjamin Netanyahu's appalling speech. He used lots of things to tug at the heartstrings. At 6:29 a.m. as children were sleeping soundly in their beds in the towns and kibbutz next to Gaza, suddenly heaven turned to hell. 3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. They butchered 1,200 people in 41 countries, including 39 Americans. It's rhetoric to get Congress behind them. Do you think it worked, Taylor?
I do think it works on a lot of Americans. I do think the tide is shifting a little bit where more and more people are becoming aware of this very close relationship between the United States and Israel. I do agree with what James said. There is a complicity that the United States has, not just complete control. So we are seeing eye to eye on this. And then also, too, I think most people do understand this at this point, is that there is a two eyes intelligence sharing agreement between the United States and Israel, which is unique to both of these countries. But if you look at some of the policies that have been taken just in the past, I want to say 1 or 2 years, when it comes to being an American citizen on U.S. soil and being able to criticize the Israeli government, there has been states that have passed laws which restrict this speech. And that's really concerning to me. And it was alluded to during yesterday's speech frequently. And I don't understand why more Americans, especially those who are on the right, who are talking about the importance of free speech, who happen to also be very much in support of Israel and Netanyahu, don't understand this. To cite some specifics here, you have in Georgia, there was a revision to a hate crime statute to include the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which has expanded. It's a working definition. It keeps changing. It also includes criticism of Israel, the Israeli government, its policies. South Carolina, South Dakota also adopted similar legislation, as well as the state of Florida. So it seems that many of the people in positions of power in America are very much willing to restrict the rights of Americans to cater to the ideals and perspectives of the pro-Israeli lobby, which is very concerning. But I think that there's some pushback. As we've seen, there's been many protests as well. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm happy to see that people are more waking up to the truth, and it's because of more discussions like this.
James?
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect, I think, between the American public and Congress and House representatives who are clapping, I think, like a bunch of seals waiting to be fed yesterday. I mean, look, if you look at these stats...
times.
Yes, exactly.
58 standing ovations.
That's quite astonishing, really, when you think about the fact that we're witnessing a genocide happening in real time. But listen, if you look at the American public, back in November 2023, 50% of Americans approved what Israel was doing, against 45% who did not approve. That figure by March this year had dropped to 36% approval, with 55% against. It's clear that the American people are not supportive of what Israel is doing and what we're seeing on our screens. And yet we've got the senators and House representatives all clapping it along. And I think I was thinking about this morning, and I actually did a bit of searching, and I think around 20% of senators and House representatives are either former military or currently serving in the American military. There is definitely a big influence, I think, on American politics of the military objective. And, you know, it's clear, like,